what do we expect from Saquon Barkley this year? Like, you talked about having to be on the field, but let's just pretend that Saquon Barkley is going to play, at least most of the games this season. How much of an impact do you think he makes? And do you think that he can be one of the guys that leads the NFL in rushing yards? Because we do have the odds for most rushing yards over at BetMGM. And Saquon Barkley has the fifth shortest odds at 14-1. Do you think he can contend with the likes of Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, and Bijan Robinson? I'm surprised that he's that high on the list, but the guy's electric.
Yeah, they're counting on the Falcons leaning into Bijan there, I guess, the books. I think Barkley can, but again, everything's got to go right like it did last year. And I don't see Saquon Barkley having back-to-back years where he gets a chance to play as much as he did last year. I don't see it. I'm hopeful. I don't never wish injury on anybody, obviously, but is it possible? Sure. Is it probable? I'm not betting on it. I'm not betting on Saquon Barkley to lead the league in rushing. I mean, unless he's got a huge first month of the season and there's still a decent number on the board somewhere, then maybe I start to look at it. But right now, even at 14-1, I'm not running to the book to bet on Saquon Barkley to lead the league in rushing. I'm not.
Yeah, same. I think the better bet for probably the Giants and Saquon Barkley is looking at them on a game-by-game basis. Because Saquon Barkley, I remember last year, was usually, a solid bet for an anytime touchdown, at least earlier in the season, because not only can he run it in, he also can catch some passes. So I think those are the guys you target for anytime touchdowns, guys like Christian McCaffrey, guys like Austin Eckler. So we shall see on that front. Are you somebody who's willing to take the 7 points or take the 6.5 if you're getting it with the Giants? I think that's the situation in which I will be looking at the Giants. Like, if they're getting too many points, which again, I fell into this trap when they played the Eagles in the postseason, didn't go in my favor. So maybe I'm wrong.
See, they were cover machines last year. So yeah, if they're getting points, most situations, I think I'm going to take them. And I'm going to here's the thing that it comes down to. When you're going to lean on a running back and you're going to ask your quarterback to be a game manager and his biggest target is going to be a tight end in the middle of the field, your defense better show up and ensure you're playing in low-scoring games. And that's the other side of this coin is, do they have enough big-time players when you're trusting two rookie corners, too, to play in low-scoring games so that Barkley and Daniel Jones can drag them to victory?
Charlotte, what is the ceiling and the floor for the Giants this year? What are the range of outcomes?
I think the ceiling, everyone wants playoffs again, just given last year that happened so quickly under first-year head coach Brian Daboll. So that is the hope. That is what everyone wants. I think the floor, obviously, is maybe like a seven-win season, obviously lower than that if things go really south. But they have really good coaching. We saw Brian Daboll outperform expectations, win awards. So I think a 7-win season feels attainable this year, at least, as the floor, in my opinion. And beyond that, we'll kind of see what happens, especially with a tougher schedule and a tougher division, too. I mean, the Eagles, Cowboys, and even the Commanders, maybe as a dark horse. I don't think we should count those teams out.
Charlotte, when I look at the schedule, I see it tough first third in particular, the first 6 weeks in particular, starting against the Cowboys, Niners defense on the road, and then trips to Miami and Buffalo early as well. What's the expectation, knowing that it's probably not realistic to expect them to come out of the gate as hot as they did last year? Is there, I guess, around those who watch the team, certainly the team's going to go out and they're going to expect themselves to win every game, but around those watching this team, what is the expectation for where they need to be after, say, that week 6 game in Buffalo?
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about a record per se. I think for me, looking at those first 3 weeks especially, 2-1 would be really successful if they can win against the Cowboys, if they can get that win over Arizona, which they need to get that win over Arizona. And then 49ers kind of being a questionable in my eyes. But then you have the road games at Miami and Buffalo, which it's just going to be tough. And it all is kind of how they started the season. We saw last year they started so hot, which really carried them through that November or early December portion. So what is that going to look like if it's kind of the opposite? And how does this team redeem itself? What does the coaching do to carry it? is going to be fascinating to watch. I really think they need that win over the Cowboys to start the season to really get this get it on the right track and get it going to make up ground for what comes next.
The question for me is, as it relates to the Buckeyes, is if they're not able to generate as much offense as last year because there is transition at the quarterback position, if that slows down Harrison or Egbuka at all, the transition at quarterback, is their defense up to the task? Because they struggled at times last year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's another question. Look, the thing that you'll find when the coverage of this team in Columbus, Ohio, I can't imagine it's any different than, say, what coverage for the New York Yankees is in New York. I mean, the amount of reporters, the amount of interest. I mean, we are getting daily updates about, what's happening at right tackle, left tackle, center. We're pouring into what's going on with all 5 of the defensive back positions. Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, he's got cool names for his different safeties. He calls the free safety the adjuster. He calls the strong safety the bandit. So we're getting all sorts of daily updates on what's going on there. And I just don't know if we can lock in what that answer is going to be, because you said it. It doesn't really matter what Ohio State's going to do against Indiana, game 1 of the season. They'll have the talent alone to win that game, and even on the defensive side too. And, it really might not show itself against Notre Dame. Maybe they got enough to handle the Irish. But when you make that turn and you've got to beat Michigan to go to Indianapolis to get to the Big Ten championship game, which is what we just talked about, the expectation is, and if you're going to do anything else, you've got to have a championship-level defense. And you've got to stop having these mental breakdowns. And you also just need to have some guys that are dudes back there. Where have the cornerbacks been at Ohio State that have gone right on to the NFL draft and been first-round picks and made lots of money there? Where's that next Jeff Okudah? Where's that next Denzel Ward or Marshawn Lattimore? Everybody's pointing to Denzel Burke, that he's going to be fixed this year. He's going to be that guy for Ohio State, and maybe a transfer from Ole Miss and Davison Igbinosun. He's had a nice camp. But it's one thing to talk about it and hear about good practices in fall camp. I mean, you are going up against Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. How could that not make you better, right? There's one point. But you got to see it, and I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'm not going to lie.
Usually we'll see this in the NFL. We'll see a few fights because these are competitive guys at, their prime. Do you think that this is a good thing that shows like competitive nature? Or do you think these guys need to be adults and, be a little more mature?
I used to come from the angle, the latter angle there of, oh, come on, you're professionals. What do you need to fight at practice for? But I don't think the fights are necessarily born out of the same stupid schoolyard mentality that had me meeting Mike Ritter on the train tracks behind the middle school in 8th grade. Like, it's more about the heat of the moment, like you said, and I want to get some tackle football back in my bloodstream, right? Like, I was up at Steelers camp yesterday. There were a couple big hits. George Pickens took one shot in the middle of the field in particular where everything stopped for a split second. And everybody in the bleachers, everybody on the sidelines, all the players and coaches went, and then he got up and everything was okay. But you need to have those moments sometimes in order to feel like you're playing football, right? And that can lead sometimes to what the Browns and Eagles had the last couple of days, where perhaps one team goes a little too far. Somebody smacked the ball out of Deshaun Watson's hands. If that's enough to get things going and get guys cooking and get tackle football and get contact back into the bloodstream, I'm okay with it. Because here's the roundabout angle for me on this, Chelsa. The faster we get to an expanded regular season and no preseason games, the happier this guy is going to be. Because I have no use for preseason football. Florio said it on a station last week somewhere. He said, someday we will have 20 regular season games and no preseason games. Maybe we're still a decade away from that, but it's going to happen someday. So give it to me. And the faster we get to joint practices serving as replacements for exhibition games, the faster we get to eliminating the preseason altogether and just having a 20-game regular season and having football all the way until March. Gimme, please. So that's my roundabout way of saying, yes, please fight at joint practices so I don't need to watch preseason football.
You sound like Roger Goodell, who's like, yes, we have football on Sundays, but what about adding Wednesdays? And what about football on Christmas? And how about let's steal the spotlight from the NBA every single chance we get? At some point, you got to let these guys rest. Like 20 games a season?